If we are in the last days, and I have no doubts, these are the end times. One of the major prophecies that we should be looking for, seeing signs of, has to do with the rebuilding of the Jewish temple and Jerusalem. Now, to begin with, I want to start off with the prophecy about Jerusalem, because this is, like the coming third temple, a major prophecy for the last days. This article from Israel Today will give you what the prophet Zechariah told us about Jerusalem in chapter 12 of Zechariah. So since they cover this in this article, I'm just going to read the article for you that they talk about what's happening in Israel today. This article came out November the 23rd of 2010, but is just as relevant and current as August 6, 2017 today, because the same exact thing is still occurring. The headline, Jerusalem, a cup of trembling and a burdensome stone. Now, they took that right from Zechariah. The prophecy of Zechariah, chapter 12, was written approximately 2,500 years ago, predicting a future day when the world's focus would be on Jerusalem. Behold, I make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people around about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. Let me go on. It says further in verses 7, 8, and 9, the prophecy makes it clear that God will ultimately save the city and its people, but to the surrounding nations, the attempted conquest of Jerusalem will cause them great trouble. And to every nation pursuing to lift Jerusalem out of the Jewish control, it will prove to be a heavy burden and be injurious to them all. This is widely regarded as an end-time prophecy, and by examining the current geopolitical and spiritual situation of the Middle East conflict, it is safe to say the time frame of this prophecy is upon us. A little further down in the report it says, today, millions of Jewish people have returned, and many are still making Aliyah as prophesied in the Bible. However, the Islamic community, the nations surrounding Israel, Psalm 83 verses 4 through 8, the international community, and the Vatican all have a different goal in mind for Jerusalem. They would remove complete Jewish control over the city and erase the Jewish victory in the 1967 miraculous Six-Day War, and either divide Jerusalem or attempt a complete conquest of it, if they could. So this report that came out November the 23rd of 2010 hit the target right in the bullseye, because that's exactly what's taking place towards the nation of Israel, and specifically Jerusalem, because that is where the most holy site for both the Jewish people and the Muslims are, right there on the Temple Mount area. And if you've been watching the news, you'll see that the majority of the world is now coming against Jerusalem, coming against their policies. Now, to confirm the prophecies are true, here are just a few of the articles and videos showing us without a doubt Jerusalem has in fact become that burdensome stone. Here's how the world turned against Israel. That came out December the 2nd of 2014. Here's another one from February the 5th of 2015. UN condemns Israel, ignores Hezbollah. There's another article from the Jerusalem Post. The headline, survey, the whole world is against us. This is how the Israelis are viewing what's happening to Israel, as all the nations are lining up to come against Israel and, of course, Jerusalem.
Perhaps you have seen Jerusalem in the news lately. If not, you're one of the very few. In the past few years, attempt after attempt has been made to find a way to bring peace to the Middle East, specifically between Israel and the Palestinians. Each time the peace talks have come to a standstill because of Jerusalem. exactly as the prophets of God foretold 2,500 years ago. Christians regard it for historical and biblical reasons, but not to die for. And yet the late lights are burning tonight in every headquarters of every capital of every nation that has international relevance, and their leaders are struggling with what to do about the issue of Jerusalem.
Under the Obama administration, as you can see from this New York Post article that came out October the 4th of 2015, Team Obama is throwing Israel to the diplomatic wolves. President Obama is following exactly what the prophet Zechariah warned, that all the nations would turn against the nation of Israel in the last days, and that would also include the United States of America. Look what it says. President Obama's determination to turn America into just another one of the United Nations' 193 members sends a clear message to Israel. You're on your own.
It does appear through Donald Trump, the Lord has given us a little bit of leeway in that Donald Trump is fully supporting the nation of Israel, unlike his predecessor, Barack Hussein Obama. And so I believe that Donald Trump will have a short stay, whether it be for 4 or 8 years. And after that, I believe that we will witness another president that will begin to go against the nation of Israel as Barack Hussein Obama did. Because after all, we do know that the Lord's words always come to pass. And as you can see from the scripture, he said that all the people of the earth will be gathered together against it. So watch this short clip from his announcement on December the 6th of 2017 about moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Then I'll show you, just in a short time that Donald Trump has been president, how the burdensome stone of Jerusalem is already affecting his leadership as president of the United States, and how many countries are coming against his proclamation about moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Watch this.
After more than 2 decades of waivers, we are no closer to a lasting peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. It would be folly to assume that repeating the exact same formula would now produce a different or better result. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. This is nothing more or less than a recognition of reality. It is also the right thing to do. It's something that has to be done. That is why, consistent with the Jerusalem Embassy Act, I am also directing the State Department to begin preparation to move the American Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This will immediately begin the process of hiring architects, engineers, and planners so that a new embassy, when completed, will be a magnificent tribute to peace.
So here we go again. On January the 6th of 2017, we see Donald Trump facing opposition by the Palestinian organization. You'll see this that came out of this PalWatch.org. Abbas advisor on religious affairs. If the U.S. moves its embassy to Jerusalem, it is a declaration of war on all Muslims. So the road to fulfill the Psalm 83 war and the Zechariah prophecy about Jerusalem being that major problem or that burdensome stone, it's already in the works, folks. Now read what he says, and I'll bring you up to current events.
The news is very clear. Every time somebody centers on Jerusalem, tensions rise and there's talk about bloodshed. The Jerusalem Post, that came out January the 3rd of 2017, says it all. Bloodshed will follow if Trump moves U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem.
Was the Jerusalem Post correct about the coming bloodshed over this burdensome city, Jerusalem? Take a look at this article that came out January the 17th of 2018. PA chairman threatens war over Jerusalem. Essentially, again, The same thing that Zechariah tells us, people coming against the nation of Israel, and the prophet Ezekiel, where these nations will be coming against Israel in the Ezekiel war. It says, Palestinian Authority Chairman Abbas threatened war if U.S. President Donald Trump does not allocate Jerusalem as a capital of the future Palestinian state. In a Cairo speech, Abbas said, Jerusalem is the key to peace if it is our capital, and if it is not, it is the key to war. Trump will need to choose. So the road has been set in prophecy already, and the events that we're seeing are the events that are taking us to the exact fulfillment of what the Lord warned about in our generation. Now, on that same day of January the 17th, 2018, from Israel Today, look what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says. He adds fuel to the fire about Jerusalem. Netanyahu says U.S. Embassy will move to Jerusalem sooner than expected. When the U.S. President Donald Trump publicly recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, both he and his administration said it would take several years to actually move the American embassy there. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he expects that move to happen much sooner. Speaking to reporters during his current visit to India, Netanyahu suggested that the U.S. Embassy could move to Jerusalem within a year. Now, keep in mind, the last days events are supposed to happen as what? As birth pain. That is what Jesus said. So we should be looking for these events to speed up, including the rebuilding of the temple and this holy city becoming much more burdensome to the point it will fulfill that prophecy. Now, as far as the bloodshed, the Jerusalem Post talked about this bloodshed that would follow. Has that happened? You better believe it. Take a look at this.
All right, protests are being held across the Palestinian territories over Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Trump also gave the go-ahead to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which has long been contested by Israelis and Palestinians. Here are pictures from the West Bank. Protesters have been burning tires and throwing objects at Israeli security forces, which have responded with tear gas and water cannons. Authorities say dozens of people have been injured. A producer from RT Arabic was caught up in the unrest and needed medical assistance. Protests against Trump's decision have been spreading across the Middle East as well.
No one has the right to play with the fates of billions of people for the sake of one's personal ambitions.
Ignoring the Palestinian Muslim and Christian rights in Jerusalem will only fuel further extremism and undermine the war against terrorism.
They cannot oppose people's feelings and beliefs. This is a new type of adventurism and global arrogance of the U.S.
Now, further down in this video, this is what was reported. I cannot stress this enough because it is showing the prophecies are going to be fulfilled completely soon. Take a look at the statement that is being said by this Shia militia. It's identical, if you will, to Psalm 83, which that psalm says they're going to destroy. They're coming together as a confederacy to get rid of Israel so that her name doesn't even exist anymore. Listen.
It's their grave concern. But now one militia group in Iraq, they have come out with this direct threat against the US because of Trump's decision. And if that threat comes to fruition, there are really serious consequences there.
Trump's stupid decision will be the big spark for removing Israel from the body of the Islamic nation and a legitimate reason to target American forces.
So when you look back at one of the articles that I already showed you back in 2014, how the world is coming against Israel, and you look at the current events, late 2017, early 2018, we've jumped. It should be very obvious that the birth pangs from 2014 to now, early 2018, are ratcheting up. They will continue to do so the closer we get to the beginning of the tribulation.
Ever since 1967, when Israel reclaimed the East Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, this area has been the most burdensome stone for world leaders. In any time, Jews try to go up to this area during the Temple Mount, where their second temple once stood. All hell breaks out.
Recent tensions have been inflamed, in particular by frequent clashes between Palestinian stone throwers and Israeli security forces at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Extremist Jewish groups who want to demolish the Al-Aqsa Mosque have been increasing their visits to the compound, escorted by armed troops.
So we definitely have people who are burdening themselves over Jerusalem. Now, I covered that prophecy about Zechariah and Jerusalem. Now we're going to get to the second part that I wanted to cover, very, very important, and it all ties together, the prophecy about the rebuilt Jewish temple. There are many places in the Bible where it's referenced about this prophecy, and here's one, in Daniel 9:27, for example. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Of course, this scripture is talking about the Antichrist, who will not make a covenant, but he will only confirm a covenant that was apparently established previously. It goes on, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abomination he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So in the middle of the 7-year period of time, 3.5 years into this agreeing or confirming this covenant, the Antichrist is going to actually stop the sacrifices that have been prophesied that will be coming back in our generation. Now, like so many of the other prophecies that are being fulfilled, this is also in the works. Let me show you this article that came out March 31st of 2015 from the Times of Israel. Passover sacrifice reenacted by Jewish priests in training. And they give you a picture here of them carrying the animals that they're going to sacrifice, and they're practicing for the real thing that is coming up. Now, in this article, they show the backdrop of the temple that's going to be rebuilt. And they're practicing their sacrifices in the near future. There's going to be the actual temple where they'll be doing the sacrifices that the prophet Daniel was told by God. Now, there's another prophecy that Jesus Christ gave to us in Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. And he's referring back to the Old Testament and what I just showed you from Daniel's prophecy. So he's actually repeating what we already were told from the Old Testament. Now, moving on to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, Paul the apostle writes to us about the Antichrist. And he says, who opposes and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in, now get this, in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So the temple has to be rebuilt. The Antichrist is going to come, and he is going to walk physically into that prophesied third temple that will be built soon.
All right, so we're coming to the last prophecy that I want to share with you about this temple. It comes from Revelation chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, and it says this, And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise, and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they trod under foot 42 months, or 3.5 years, or 1,260 days. Now, there are many Bible teachers and scholars who believe that somehow there will be an agreement that is made, possibly that covenant that Daniel talks about, that the Antichrist will make, so that both the Islam, you see here the Dome of the Rock, and a Jewish temple that is rebuilt again would coexist together. And since the Lord said over here, you'll see, without the temple leave out, measure it not. So it is possible that the outer court area that he's talking here would be able to allow the temple for the Jews to be rebuilt right next to the Dome of the Rock. Now, if the Lord said, rise and measure the temple of God, a temple has to exist, and it hasn't been built yet, and we can definitely see the road to the rebuilding is just before us.
So now that you see all of the prophecies, let me show you that God is working to fulfill these very words, and he's doing it so through the Israeli government. My friends, this third temple is definitely going to come. And here's the proof: the road is being set.
Now, to start off, look at the Jerusalem Post. High-speed train from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv to be completed by 2018. It came out March 29th of 2016. The highly anticipated high-speed train that will connect Jerusalem to Tel Aviv in under 30 minutes will be operational in 2018, the head of Israel Railways announced on Monday. And during the tour with the Knesset members at the construction site for the NIS $182 billion project, Boaz Tavir, CEO of the railway, said the train will take passengers from Jerusalem's International Convention Center to Tel Aviv's Haganah station in 28 minutes flat. Now let's move into 2018, January the 15th, breaking Israel news. And it has to do again with this fast train that will be moving literally millions of people right to the doorsteps of the temple that is going to be rebuilt. That's the one that Jesus Christ tells us, and also, as you already saw, the reference in the book of Daniel in chapter 9. Now, before you listen to this article, just understand that they're talking about this being completed just in time for the Passover. And in 2018, that Passover begins Friday, March 30th at sunset and ends at Saturday, April the 7th at nightfall. And that is 71 days from now, the date of January the 15th of 2018. So listen to the news that reflects the road that we're on to fulfill prophecy.
The new high-speed train nearing completion connecting Israel's recently upgraded international airport directly to the Temple Mount is expected to be complete just in time for Passover, which one mystic sees as fitting since so many esoteric hints indicate the road to the third temple will be paved with train tracks. Yakutiel Fish, who writes a Gula and Kabbalah blog in Hebrew called Sod HaChazmal, The Secret Energy, related an anecdote in his blog on Thursday about Rabbi Yehoshua Leib Diskin, a leading rabbi in Jerusalem in the late 19th century. Fish related that Rabbi Diskin heard the whistle of the first train to arrive in Jerusalem in 1892, and said, "They are clearing the way for Moshiach Messiah, and the Gula, redemption, is on the way." Fish sees this pre-Messiah train phenomenon being played out to an even stronger degree with the new high-speed track that will bring travelers directly from Ben Gurion International Airport to the Western Wall in Jerusalem. The train is expected to begin service in April, just in time for the Passover holiday.
Now, the prophecy steps are happening slowly, but they are definitely taking place. Although the article that you're looking at right now was issued on October the 25th of 2015, and at that time, the Jews were having a lot of trouble being allowed to go up on the Temple Mount and pray. There were sporadic movements to go up there, but they had to have guards to go up there to protect them. But things definitely have changed, as you're going to be seeing, because we are in those birth pains, and things are speeding up, and we're moving closer to the fulfillment.
Breaking Israel news: infrastructure to bring millions of pilgrims to Temple Mount quietly being constructed. For the first time in approximately 2,000 years, since the time of the Second Temple, plans are being formed by, guess who? The Israeli government, to build an effective infrastructure for Jews to make their obligatory pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem. So the government of Israel, they're producing these mass trains, high-speed trains, to move pilgrims and Jews to go up to an area which they cannot go up to right now. But they are making the plans in the background to do just that. And that's why this article says quietly being constructed. If the Israeli government just came out and told everybody what they're doing concerning moving Jews to the Temple Mount, massive amounts of people and Jews to the area that is currently closed off to the Jews, it would cause instant war between Israel and the Arabs, the Muslims. It says the third temple will require a functional infrastructure that could facilitate the transportation of millions of Jews to Jerusalem during and after these festivals. Israel's Minister of Transportation, Yisrael Katz, has publicly stated that facilitating this was his intention when planning the line of the fast train currently under construction between the airport in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. In a meeting with Temple Movement representatives in February, the minister explained, as a Kohen, Jew of the priestly caste, I have a special connection to the holy site. In front of my eyes, I constantly see the words, prepare the way, prepare the way. So you have Israel's Minister of Transportation, Mr. Katz, who is also a Kohen, Jew of the priestly caste, saying he wants to prepare the way, prepare the way. Where else have we heard this before? It looks like he took it right out of Isaiah in the Old Testament, chapter 40, verse 3. A voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway of our God. So the train is associated with moving Jews to the Temple Mount area for one purpose and one purpose only. The temple is a significant sign that will usher in, they believe, their Messiah. So there's a lot of significance in the articles that you're reading that are coming from people inside the government. So what is Katz planning? Look at the rest of this article. Katz is planning on extending the line of the fast train to transport people from Ben Gurion Airport to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem directly to the Western Wall. And what's at the Western Wall? It's the Temple Mount area right above it. The final stop will be the Kotel Har Habayat stop, Western Wall, Temple Mount stop. I said the road is being paved. I should have said the railroad is being paved for this building of the Temple Mount. There's the bottom line. The Israeli government, people in that government, are preparing to move these massive numbers to a temple that's not even built yet. So you would have to conclude, if they're going to spend millions upon millions of dollars on the infrastructure to transport large numbers of people, you would have to assume that the agenda is rebuilding of that third temple. And all that's taking place is they're fulfilling exactly what Daniel said and what Jesus Christ warned us about this third temple and the Antichrist coming when that temple stands. So I'm going to continue to finish off this article. It says, we expect millions of Jews coming to the Temple Mount even before the temple is built. So transportation is a potential bottleneck, Heyman explained to Breaking Israel News. We need to open up more entrances to the Temple Mount since there is currently only one entrance available to the Jews. Now in this article you're going to find out that Israel isn't going to just rely on a fast train to move these Jews that are coming from all over the world to go and pray and worship on the Temple Mount at the temple that's going to be rebuilt. Take a look at the rest of this article. In a similar vein, Jerusalem Mayor Nair Barkat has recently announced plans to build a cable car system that will be capable of transporting thousands of people per hour to the area of the Western Wall and guess what? And Temple Mount. The Israeli government ministers just recently approved this plan during a cabinet meeting held inside the Western Wall tunnels. So again, Israeli officials planning for the day when that third temple is built. So the article talks about the trains, it talks about the cable cars. What else? The stated purpose of all of these plans is to modernize the capital city, making it easier for both residents and tourists to navigate its increasing traffic. But it is abundantly clear that all of these upgrades will soon be used for the purpose of allowing millions of Jews from around the globe to quickly and easily visit the temple and to fulfill their biblical obligation. We need to establish express service bus transportation to the Temple Mount from all parts of the country, Heyman said. The Temple Mount Express bus lines will have special blue and white bus stops enabling Jews to regularly travel directly to the Temple Mount, pray, and return home. So I don't care what is going on the Temple Mount right now, as of August the 6th of 2017, in relation to the riots, the violence caused by the Muslims on that Temple Mount area. Things in the very near future are going to totally change. The Israeli government is preparing for it in the background quietly, and Jesus told us it's coming. All they're doing is fulfilling his words. So let's continue on with the article. What we are seeing is to prepare the way for Jews to go up to the Temple Mount, Heyman said. This is a fact. If the Islamic leaders were so intelligent and they picked up on exactly what Israel's plans are and what they're actually doing, preparing for the Jews to go up to the Temple Mount, this would be an act of war, a takeover of the Temple Mount, or even sharing it for that matter, to the Muslim leaders is an act of war. But it isn't if the temple will be built, it's when. Let's continue. When the temple is built, the changes will be even greater. One of the principles of the final redemption is that it will come about through a series of processes that will seem to most to be no more than natural evolution. For those that have a better understanding and knowledge of these processes, it is clear that in order to accommodate the masses that will need to come to Jerusalem 3 times a year, a massive upgrade to the current Jerusalem infrastructure is required. Well, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about for a declaration of war. This is from the Jerusalem Post. It came out October the 30th of 2014. Abbas closing off the Temple Mount tantamount to declaration of war. This is Ahmad Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Organization. Palestinian Authority President Ahmad Abbas called the closure of the Temple Mount to all visitors on Thursday a declaration of war as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called for calm and civility in Jerusalem following the attempted assassination of Yehuda Glick Wednesday night. The PA chief pinned the blame for the dangerous escalation in violence on the Israeli government, saying the peak was this morning when the Jerusalem leadership decided to close the holy site to all visitors. So as I said, any tampering with this holy site at the Temple Mount for the Muslims is huge problems, not only for Israel, but for the world. Now, what I found interesting about this article, you'll see here that Yehuda Glick, he was, as it says, his life was in jeopardy because he was shot 5 times by an assassin. He didn't die. Yehuda Glick just happens to be one of the head people for the Temple Mount Institute who was pushing for the rebuilding of the Jewish temple and full access for the Jews to be able to pray on the Temple Mount. And since October the 30th of 2014, after that assassination, guess who was elected to the Israeli Knesset? Yehuda Glick was elected, and he is one of the Israeli officials who continues to push for the temple to be rebuilt. God is in control. The temple will be rebuilt, as I said, over and over again. just like the prophecies tell us. And as time goes by, Israel is going to put its hold on the Muslims so that the Jews can have that full access.
On July 12th, I put the following report into this production. This is what I warned at the beginning of this next report from El Trazir on June 7th of 2017. You'll see why I gave you this information beforehand. The headline to the report: Israel approves plans to, get this, tighten grip on East Jerusalem.
Here's an article that just came out June 7th of 2017. Israel approves plans to tighten grip on East Jerusalem. Well, if you know anything about East Jerusalem, you know that that's where the Temple Mount is. It says Palestinian leaders have denounced new construction projects they say will further tighten Israel's grips on occupied East Jerusalem and its holy places, including the incendiary site of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and that would be where the Dome of the Rock is. The most elaborate plan is for a cable car intended to bring thousands of visitors an hour to the Western Wall in its Jewish prayer plaza immediately below Al-Haram al-Sharif, a compound containing Al-Aqsa and the golden top Dome of the Rock. Now take a look at this. It says the $56 million project was unveiled at a meeting of the Israeli cabinet in tunnels below the Al-Haram al-Sharif. It is the first time the cabinet has met in Jerusalem's old city, which Israel annexed in violation of the international law. Now this is what the Islamic people are saying, that Israel's in violation of the law. But Israel owns this land and they're in violation of nothing. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the meeting in the provocative location late last month to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Israel's illegal occupation of East Jerusalem. Now keep in mind, it's not illegal at all. Israel was attacked by these Arabs and Israel won the war. Israel retook what was theirs in the first place. And they were celebrating the recapture of Jerusalem. And this, my friends, was also a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Palestinians, meanwhile, have expressed mounting concern that Netanyahu's stated intention to strengthen Jerusalem conceals a policy of driving out Palestinians and seizing control over the Al-Aqsa compound. Israel claims 2 ancient Jewish temples are built under the mosque. Israel is sending a message to the Palestinians and to Jordan, whose officials formally oversee the site, that Al-Aqsa is no longer yours. We can enter and we can do as we please there. And this is what I've been talking about for years. The Muslims are afraid of a takeover. And by the amount of money and the preparations that the Israeli government is doing behind the scenes, I would say that it is a good possibility that's exactly what we will see in the very near future. At the weekend, Jibril Jarboub, a senior official in the Palestinian Authority, told the Israeli TV that Netanyahu's government had to stop treating the site as though it were under Israeli sovereignty. If you want to create an explosion, just say it's ours, he said. And of course, the explosion that he's talking about, obviously, would be another huge conflict between Israel and the Arabs, the Muslims.
I already showed you how the Israelis are approving plans to actually tighten the grips on East Jerusalem. I also told you earlier in this video that the Jews were not allowed to go up to the Temple Mount area to pray. Well, in a few years, things have already begun to change. And it does appear that the Israeli government is starting to put their feet down and make way for this future influx of Jews to go up and pray at the Temple Mount. So number one, I warned you about this article from the 7th of June 2017. I told you that I placed this article July the 12th of 2017. 2 days after I put the information in this production, let me show you what happened, because it addresses this article and it also addresses the warning that I gave about Israel clamping down on the Muslims to eventually allow them to have full access to the Temple Mount and control it the way they used to. Well, things have transpired to actually force Israel to tighten its grip on this burdensome stone area, the Temple Mount. Look at this article that came out July the 14th. We need to close the Temple Mount to Muslims. And the reason why is because there was an attack by terrorists right there on the Temple Mount. And as a result, the Deputy Defense Minister wants to close off completely this area, the Temple Mount, to Muslims, which would definitely infuriate them. Listen to this. Deputy Defense Minister Rabbi Ella Ben Dehan responded on Friday morning to the shooting attack at the Old City's Lion Gate in Jerusalem. The Cave of the Patriarchs, the Temple Mount, and Shechem Nebulus are the three places the Bible tells us were bought at full price in Israel. Ben Dehan said, "These are the three places where no one can question the Jewish nation's ownership. We see that in the past week, Palestinians have made great efforts to undermine the Jewish nation's connection to these places specifically. It started with UNESCO's decision that the Cave of Patriarchs is a Palestinian heritage site, and it continued today with the three terrorists who carried out an attack immediately after leaving the Temple Mount. Israel must fight this effort by, now get this, strengthening its rule and hold on these areas, and must ensure that every Jew can pray in these places safely and without fear. The police did well by closing off the Temple Mount, and it should remain closed until we are certain that the area will be quiet and secure." Jerusalem Deputy Mayor Dov Kalmanovich warned that the shooting attack from the direction of the Temple Mount shows that the terrorists have crossed an additional red line, and it shows the weapons have trickled from Shem neighborhoods in Jerusalem's Arab areas. The current lack of sovereignty in the areas surrounding Jerusalem, the fact that police refrain from entering the Arab neighborhoods, and the weapons confiscations have all caused this bitter and unfortunate event. We need to close the Temple Mount to Muslims for an extended period of time and to tighten our security and diplomatic control of it. The Temple Mount is in our hands should not be a slogan. It needs to be a clear fact on the ground. So there you go. If Israel needed any excuse at all, they now have it to force what they've been doing quietly in the background, getting ready to take over the Temple Mount and to begin funneling the Jews and tourists right there on the Temple Mount area to carry out their faith on the Temple Mount area, which they haven't been able to do. The breaking Israel news that came out October the 26th of 2016 gives us information about what's currently happening at the Temple Mount. The headline reads, "For the first time ever, Jews allowed to pray on Temple Mount as thousands ascend for holidays." So they're already starting. They're going to need these cable cars. They're going to need the rail systems and the buses. In a not-so-subtle response to the recent UNESCO resolutions denying all connection between Jerusalem and the Jewish people, record-breaking numbers of Jews ascended to the Temple Mount over the 3-week holiday period encompassing Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. And in an incredible reversal of the usual status quo, some were even allowed to pray there. Haaretz reported, while the number of non-Muslim visitors permitted on the Temple Mount is usually restricted, a relatively quiet holiday season allowed for record numbers of Jewish visitors to ascend and marking a small but significant shift in enforced policy to discreetly pray at the site, which is considered the holiest in Judaism. All told, over 3,000 Jews, many of them religious, visited the temple over the holiday period. I would recommend that any Christian who loves the Lord keep your eyes on what's going on in Israel, in East Jerusalem, and on the Temple Mount area, because you're going to see a lot of activity concerning the Jews making headway, allowing their people to go up and have the rights, just like the Muslims do right now. The steps we're seeing taken by the Israeli government are forging the way for the appearance of the Antichrist. Now, in closing, I want to show you the route that the Israelis have planned for their cable cars to go over to the Temple Mount area. And you'll see the route follows right here. You get off the Dung Gate and you walk through and you go right up to where the Dome of the Rock is, soon to be the Jewish temple. These are the plans that were approved by the Israeli government. So in the future, as you see in this picture, thousands will flock to the Western Wall, make their way up to the Temple Mount for the traditional priestly blessings. Only it won't be at the Temple Wall, it will be at the temple. We are definitely in the last days, and the prophecies are speeding up.
Well, now that you know what the government of Israel is doing behind the scenes to prepare the way for the transporting of millions of people to this new temple, people like the Temple Mount Institute in Israel have been preparing for a very long time because they know the time of the Messiah is foretold in the Scriptures. And so let me show you some of the things briefly, what they've been doing to prepare for that day when they begin the real sacrifices and services there on the Temple Mount in the built third temple. Now keep in mind, this is only a glimpse of what I normally show in my prophecy seminars. But I think it's a good idea that you see some of the things that have already been done for the preparation of that third temple and their services. The Temple Mount Institute have announced that they have a school to train Levitical priests. Why? For the actual services that they believe will be done in the very near future. We haven't seen priests like this for almost 2,000 years, and it's not by coincidence they're here again in our generation. Now, in the Old Testament, they had a host of sacred vessels and vestments. And over these many years, since 1948, the Temple Mount Institute has recreated every single one of those vessels and vestments that were used in the sacrifices 2,000 years ago. And they have made them identically to like they were 2,000 years ago. Now, the Temple Mount Institute wanted to begin practicing the slaughter of these animals for the atonement of their sins like they did 2,000 years ago. They ran into a problem with animals' rights, and as you can see from this article that came out in Jerusalem, it says, Judge rules Paschal sacrifice practice, proper appeal filed. As you can see from this article that came out April 1st of 2015, the Temple Mount Institute won their case. They won the appeal. And you can see from the headline, Temple Mount activists slaughter lamb in public rehearsal of Passover sacrifice. So the Lord is removing the obstacles so that the prophecies can be fulfilled. And there's no question it would have to be resolved because the Bible tells us they're going to start up the sacrifices. So not only did the Israeli courts give favor to the Temple Mount Institute, allowing them for these practice of sacrifices, the Jerusalem Post also talks about United States, the House. It says the House passes bill protecting circumcision ritual slaughter as religious freedoms. So we're marching down the road to fulfill that prophecy where the Antichrist will actually stop the sacrifices. But in order for him to stop those sacrifices, they have to start. And that's what you're seeing, this road being forged through the Temple Mount Institute, there in Jerusalem. Now, another very important event took place in 2005. And you can see this article that came out from the Al Jazeera. Sanhedrin launched in Tiberias. What you have here is the religious bodies, the religious men that have now formed the Sanhedrin. Keep in mind it was the Sanhedrin that Jesus Christ stood before in this unlegal court when they brought him to the Sanhedrin at night to try him. And we haven't seen the Sanhedrin for almost 2,000 years, like we haven't seen the priests. But yet here we go again. The Sanhedrin is established. Why? Getting ready to fulfill prophecy. Now here's another major event that was reported about on August the 29th of 2016. Breaking Israel news. High priest is chosen by Sanhedrin. Temple service could be 1 week away. Just like the priest, just like the Sanhedrin, we haven't seen a high priest since Jesus stood before the Sanhedrin almost 2,000 years ago. Do you think it's a coincidence that the priest, the Sanhedrin, and now a high priest has been reestablished? It's not a coincidence. The high priest, along with the priest and the Sanhedrin, are getting ready for those sacrifices of which the Antichrist is going to stop. Now, in closing, let me show you a finality here, because the Temple Mount Institute recreated the altar that they're going to burn the animals that they sacrifice.
And now let me show you, since the reestablishment of the Sanhedrin, you can actually see for yourself the footsteps of the actual animal sacrifices that Jesus Christ warns us about. I'm going to show you a set of videos in the different years, proving to you we're only a few steps away from seeing the building of the temple and these animal sacrifices. In these videos, you will actually see that they're teaching the Leviticus priests that have also been brought back, teaching them how to do these services and also how to go through the ritual of these animal sacrifices. I'm going to start off with the year 2012, the first year where they actually did the first rehearsal, where they killed the lamb in preparation for what's to come in the future when they really sacrifice in the temple.
Bezrat Hashem, on Erev Pesach, on Friday afternoon, we'll be doing this in the Azara. With all Am Yisrael. It's first time in 2,000 years, practicing for now, but Bezrat Hashem soon will be for real.
We see this crowd of hundreds and hundreds of people from all over who came today to see this event. Actually, this should be a normal event. This is the basic command of the Torah for every Jew. On Pesach, on the holiday of Passover, we have to bring our Passover offering. Unfortunately today, we cannot do it on the Temple Mount because of the various different political reasons, but the very fact that we are here, we are saying to God, we are saying to you, Hashem, here we are ready. If it's in our hands, we are ready to worship you as free people, as the holiday of Pesach is the holiday of freedom. We are here as free people, ready to say, here we are ready. We hope that in the next few years we will be able to already do it the way it should be done in the temple, on the Temple Mount.
The Temple Institute was founded on the principle of doing everything within our power towards the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. This year, the Temple Institute took a giant step towards making this goal a reality, a practice Passover offering, including all the stages of the service. This was not an actual Passover offering, which can only be done on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, but a drill for the purpose of increasing Israel's knowledge and preparedness for the actual bringing of the offering the moment this becomes possible. The Kohanim, descendants of Aaron and members of Israel's priesthood who participated in this event, are members of the Temple Institute's Nezer HaKodesh Academy for Priests in Training. The Torah states, "Speak to the entire assembly of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month they shall take for themselves, each man, a lamb or kid for each father's house. It It shall be yours for examination until the 14th day of this month. The entire assembly of Israel shall slaughter it in the afternoon. The Mishnah describes the steps of the Passover offering. The entire nation of Israel converges on the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Many thousands of offerings are brought within a short period of time. The Kohanim need to be expert, sensitive, and focused. The words, "Next year in rebuilt Jerusalem," are recited every year at the conclusion of the Passover Seder.
Because the Jewish temple has not been yet built, so we have to do something now just to practice. We want to practice this year, so next year we'll be ready.
There was a report that came out from Israel today. Its headline, Third Temple Alert. Police authorize Passover sacrifice next to Temple Mount. This is what the article says. Religious Jews factions say they are moving ever closer to the realization of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. The latest evidence of this is police authorization granted on Sunday for a Passover sacrificial ceremony to be held just tens of meters from where the Second Temple once stood. Religious groups have been holding public Passover sacrifices in accordance with the biblical outlines for years, but never before have they been permitted to conduct the ceremony so close to the Temple Mount, which the Muslims claim as their own, even as they deny the holy site holds any religious or historical significance for the Jewish people. Last year, the Passover sacrifice was conducted in a courtyard of the nearby Huva synagogue in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem's Old City, some 450 yards from the Temple Mount. This year, it will take place at the Davidson Center, situated at the southern foot of the Sacred Plateau and just below the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, whatever the reason is, whether it's because it's going to be the 70th year anniversary or that Donald Trump has recognized Jerusalem as the capital, whatever the reason is, they're that much closer to the goal of finally getting to their sacrifices, the real sacrifices in the temple. Now, they're only practicing now, but this is a huge deal. Practicing for something that the Lord prophesied was actually going to take place. And it won't be just practicing. You'll even see in the video that I made for you that the rabbis tell you that they will sacrifice in that temple. They're right. They're right because all they're going to do is fulfill the prophecy that Jesus Christ said, which again shows us that Jesus Christ, in fact, is the Lord our God, our Savior. And these events show us that we're that much closer to the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. So take a look at this map. You'll see the Huva synagogue. This is where they sacrificed last year. There's the distance to the Temple Mount area where the Lord prophesied that the sacrifice would begin, and also prophesying that he would stop those sacrifices 3.5 years in to the new covenant that was going to be made by the Antichrist man. That was last year. This year, here's the Davidson Center, and here's the Dome of the Rock area. This is where the temple will be built, and it's only 3 minutes away. Now, the police department authorized, as I said, the sacrificial practices. And this in the past hasn't been done. And the Temple Mount Institute people and other organizations who want to get this Temple Mount built have been pushing the government and the police department to allow them to have this. Now, before I end, I want you to understand that in 2016, it took 51 minutes to walk from the Temple Mount to Mount Scopus. That's right here where Mount Scopus is, and you can follow the dotted line here on the map to get to the Temple Mount. 51 minutes. And the people who have been pushing the rebuilding of the temple, they've been saying every year they get closer and closer until the sacrifices are done on the Temple Mount. So just from 2016, we're 51 minutes walking to 3 minutes walking distance from the David Center to the Temple Mount. 3 minutes. Definitely moving closer and closer to the fulfillment of Jesus' words. When I see events like this, I reflect back to how the apostles must have felt when they saw the prophecies from the Old Testament being fulfilled. They saw John the Baptist preparing the way, and then the Messiah coming and his ministry for 3 years, watching him rise the dead, healing the sick, then dying himself, and just as he promised, resurrecting on the third day. We in our generation are seeing the last prophecies beginning to be fulfilled. So in a way, we're much like those earlier apostles who saw those prophecies fulfilled. These are signs. This is the last generation. I'm hoping that this presentation concerning the burden of Jerusalem, as the prophet Zechariah has showed us, and the rebuilding of the temple, as Jesus and Daniel the prophet has shown us. For many people who know Bible prophecy, the question has been, what does the world think? But the most important part is not what the world thinks, is what you think. Based on what you see in the current news, comparing to the Word of God. And if you see that Word of God is running exactly parallel to the prophecies, you would be very wise to continuing watching these last days events. But even more than that, you would be even wiser to embrace what Jesus said and embrace Him as your personal Lord and Savior that Jesus warned about. The days of playing Christianity should be over. If you really love the Lord Jesus Christ with all your heart, you will live your life completely for Him. Our generation is much too close to the return of the Messiah to be playing games.
There should be no question at this point that the Antichrist is going to come, and he will go into that third temple. He is going to proclaim that he is God. So to begin to pray, asking the Lord Jesus Christ to give us the power and His strength to endure whatever He has for us in the future, because the future is rushing towards us. Jesus Christ came to this earth almost 2,000 years ago. Do you think that He came not to fulfill every prophecy that He ever gave? Do you think that He went to the cross and took a beating like this until death, knowing that none of the words that He said would come true? Christ came. He understood the consequences that He would have to go through to free us from our sins. Today is a good day to realize Christ is the Messiah. Christ is our Lamb that was slain. Today is a good day to receive Jesus Christ as your Lord and your Savior. Embrace Him now as the Lamb of God slain, because when He comes back the second time, He's coming back as a king, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, as a warrior to get rid of all unrighteousness. Let your name be recorded in His book of life today.